So we're going to start out this week with really helping you understand the trauma brain. It's essential to understand the trauma brain in order to help you understand the loop of what happens when we get triggered and how trauma gets reinforced every time we get triggered in the brain and what we need to do about it. So you need to understand this so that we can move forward in the program. So the first thing we want to start with is brain anatomy. So this is your brain, and at the very base of your brain, the most primitive or reptile part of the brain is your brain stem. Now the brain stem is responsible for everything that you do that you don't think about. So automatic things like your breathing, your ability to swallow, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your level of consciousness. When we think about the brainstem, that's the really basic functions of the body. And when we talk about somebody who's brain dead, someone who's on life support, it's this part of the brain that's being supported. When you take them off the machine, these things stop, the person dies. That's the part of the brain that we're talking about. Around the outside of your brainstem is what's called your limbic system. The limbic system is a filing system for your emotions and for all of the sensory data that goes with emotional experiences. So it's mostly impressions, but it's there to be able to give us a warning system. So when we have trauma memories, those trauma memories are oftentimes triggered, and the reason we feel sideswiped when we have a trauma memory is in this part of the brain, it's not only the memory itself that gets registered, but it's everything associated with the situation. So it's all of the sights, all of the smells, all of the sensations, whatever the taste was, all of that together is added to the single trauma incident or multiple trauma incidents, so that your brain has a way of registering potential threat. For example, if you dated someone or had trauma from someone who drove a particular kind of car, that kind of car can be registered in your brain in such a way that anytime you see that car, you're reminded of your trauma. It isn't really necessarily connected to trauma, but that's how the brain stores things. It connects everything that could be a potential warning system, a potential warning sign. And that's the reason that PTSD is so insidious, and it's the thing you need to be aware of in order to help you heal your trauma. So the next part of the brain is the brain that you see whenever you see pictures. It's that squiggly part of the brain. It's the cerebral cortex. This part of the brain is responsible for all of our learning. Everything that you learned in school, everything that you learned getting ready for your career, all of the things that you learned from infancy to toddlerhood while your brain was growing. So motor function, learning how to walk, learning how to talk. Personality is in this part of the brain. This brain also holds language skills and telling time. So this is a really important piece of the brain, but the part that's really important to understand, and what you hear when you hear people talking about trauma, is this part of the brain reacts much more slowly than the limbic system does. So the limbic system is much faster than the cerebral cortex, which makes sense if it's the limbic system's job to keep us safe. So I've superimposed both of these images because I really want you to see that when it comes to trauma responses, it's the limbic system that's first on board. And there is no bridge of communication. Remember, the cerebral cortex is where we learn language, and that does not get translated into the limbic system of our brain. That's why there's no language usually when we get triggered. It's a full-on sensory experience, and we don't have words often to describe what's happening to us. It's also fast. It's also right now. So the limbic system does not know time. It only knows right now. And it takes every threat as happening right now. So it's really important to recognize that that part of the brain that's trying to keep us safe doesn't have the basic skills that we need to understand that we're not under constant threat. And that is the absence of language in time, because it's a higher order function in the cerebral cortex and doesn't exist in the limbic system, is the reason we get overwhelmed by PTSD triggers. The thing about it is that every time the limbic system activates to tell you that you're in danger when you're not, every time the limbic system activates outside of and independent of your cerebral cortex, it reinforces your PTSD triggers. It ensures that even though that thing that happened to you before is not happening to you again, it ensures that every single time something similar shows up, you react as if you're in danger. And this encourages you, and encourages all of us to avoid anything that would remind our limbic system or trigger our limbic system to tell us that we're in danger. The problem is that the more that happens, the more our triggers and our trauma get reinforced, and the more and more narrow our life becomes. So it's really important to understand that we cannot allow it to be continuously reinforced. We have to do something different. And what is that different thing that we need to do? We need to remember there's no language and time in that part of the brain. So we have to help that part of our brain in order to heal our PTSD triggers. We have to help that part of our brain. We actually have to insert language and time into the stored memories that we have. So how do we do that? That's what this program is all about. But it's possible to create a bridge between the cerebral cortex and the limbic system to communicate to the limbic system that everything is okay. Then we can actually train that part of our brain to recognize that what was happening then isn't happening now. We can actually retrain and rewire our brain to understand that.